History is full of amazing stories and memorable people.
But we don't care about them.
No hits, deep tracks only.
Some of the most influential people in the world have been completely overlooked or just plain forgotten.
We're digging deep into the history books to bring you their stories.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Matt.
We're not historians. We're just two guys who enjoy a great story and plenty of laughs.
This is History's B-Side.
Today's B-Sider is The Other Disney Brother.
I just now realized that rhymes.
I know.
The Other Disney Brother. I like it more now. So I think it's pretty apparent at this point, at least what family we're talking about on tonight's episode. I said tonight as though everybody's listening to this at night. We're recording this on a Monday evening, so
I feel like most people listen to podcasts in the mornings, although they're going to listen to this probably on a Monday morning because it comes out on Mondays.
It does. That's true. Well, no matter what time you're listening, we're recording it in the evening, so welcome to tonight's episode.
It's not live.
So since we're going to be talking about Walt Disney and more specifically talking about his brother Roy Disney, I guess I wanted to start today's episode with a fun conversation about our favorite Disney movies, if we have them. I mean, I have them. I don't know if you do, but I figured, we do a lot of heavy, sad, taxing topics on our history podcast as a necessity. So I figured this would be kind of a more lighthearted, fun one.
Nothing bad in this episode. Nothing whatsoever.
Maybe. We'll see. So, did you grow up watching Disney movies? And if you did, do you have any favorites?
Yeah, I'm a child of the 90s, so of course I grew up watching Disney movies. I mean, we talk a lot about how we don't really watch movies, but definitely Disney movies as a kid.
Yeah.
I would say, and I have a bad memory as far as remembering what was Disney and what was like DreamWorks or whatever the other studios were, but definitely Toy Story was like my go-to movie. I feel like we've talked about that on the podcast, but maybe not. I was a big Toy Story fan. Trying to think what else. I don't know. Was like Aladdin Disney? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Pretty much all like the like fairy tales I feel like have been redone, recaptured for Disney adaptation. Right. That's what they call it. Yeah, that stuff was all good.
Yeah, I was a big fan of Hercules, and I like Toy Story too. The music in Hercules is the bomb, and Tarzan. I like the music from Tarzan. I mean, Phil Collins, but
when we were planning our trip to Athens, I think Rita made me watch Hercules because it was so long since I had seen it. Probably not since I was a little kid, but when we knew we were going there, she was like, "Oh, we have to watch Hercules. It's been so long." But it's cool. I mean, it is cool like to relive those today as an adult, like seeing some of those movies again. And I don't know, do you still have like a VCR? Well, probably not at your apartment, but like
no. My dad might. I don't know.
My parents do. They just got new TVs not that long ago, so I was helping them set them up, and my dad was like, "Oh, can you hook the VCR up to this one?" And I was like, "Sure, but why?" Because it's a VCR and it's 2021. And he was like, "Well, we have all these old movies, and maybe Justin, who is my sister's newborn infant, will want to watch them someday." This kid who, when he's old enough to watch movies, it's going to be near 2030 and these movies will be 40 years old on VCR. That thing is not going to work, and you're going to be able to get the same movies on some kind of streaming service or whatever we have 10 years from now.
You could buy them on Amazon, I'm sure, but if not, I feel like Disney Plus probably has a lot
of them. That's the thing. It's a smart TV. We have Disney Plus on those TVs. You can sit and watch all the same movies in much better quality now.
Yeah, I've heard of people like collecting the old Disney VHSs, and I don't know. I feel like it's kind of the same thing as the Beanie Babies. Like people are like, I'm going to collect these and make a ton, and then every human being collected them and they're still worthless because everybody has them.
Do you think like VHS tapes will be collectibles though. Like I think there is some kind of value in them, but they have to degrade quality over time, even just sitting in a cabinet somewhere, not even in sunlight or
Right.
anything like that. I can't imagine that like I mean there's memorabilia that I think will be worth money, but probably not the actual VHS tapes.
I mean, I feel like there's a cycle for everything, and I feel like maybe sometime in the future there'll be a collectible item. If you go back far enough, there's a lot of stuff that if it's old enough and in decent condition, it's a collectible. So I feel like in, I don't know, 50 to 100 years, they'll be, novel. I don't know that they'll still work.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
like
guess
an unopened box of them that have never been put in a VCR and watched might be the go-to, and probably in like collections, like the entire Disney catalog in VHS form unused would be worth something, but people just kind of randomly keeping Hercules and Pocahontas and Cinderella that have been watched already are probably not going to see much investment benefit.
well, there's probably people that say the same thing about like vinyl records, how they're useless technology, but people still intentionally purchase those today. And I don't know that it's the same with movies as it is with music, but some people do still have like old film roll that they can put on a projector and show movies that way. So I'm
Yeah.
curious if like VHS and DVD and like the way that we grew up watching movies will still have that sort of nostalgia, or are they too modern for that but too old to still be useful today?
Well, I think the thing about vinyl that I think attracts people is the process of it. I don't know. I internally think of it the same way I think of like my desire to be obsessive about making coffee in the morning. Like it seems like a lot of work, but I enjoy that work. I think for people, vinyl, like the act of taking care of it and, putting on the vinyl record and putting the needle on all has like a nostalgic, it's not even nostalgic. Like nobody who actually buys that stuff, and most of them are millennials, never used that in their childhood. Never did.
But that's the thing, like you would think VCR has nostalgia. Like using a VCR is something that we did as
Right.
kids, but you don't get that same kind of satisfaction from putting a VCR or putting a VHS tape in a VCR as you would from maybe playing a vinyl record,
Yeah.
because once it's in the machine, there's no like interaction with it that you're doing.
It's basically still just Netflix, but worse because you can't skip the intro or skip ahead or
you
pause
have
and
to
come back to
rewind
your
it
same
when you're
spot.
done.
Yeah. I mean, it's the whole thing is. I think it's just more inconvenient than vinyl and doesn't have as many of the tactile benefits
Right.
that vinyl has. Anyway, I don't think that they'll be worth anything for most people. But nonetheless, I mean, those movies pretty much shaped a lot of our childhoods and generations. I actually I brought up Hercules because Meg, the like not princess but heroine in it, was like the first childhood crush I can remember.
Oh my gosh.
Like of a character in a movie.
I don't think I was ever like that.
Yeah, I was like that. I feel like that doesn't surprise you.
No, not at all.
I was like, dang, she's got attitude. She doesn't really want Hercules at first. She's playing hard to get.
And you saw yourself in Hercules and had to win her over
Sure.
by being so macho, impressive
Yeah.
with your muscles.
I don't know about all that. I actually was just talking at Park Avenue, the place I work, with the chef about the Goofy movie. And
Never saw
that was another. Oh, you got to watch it. It was a favorite of me and my sister's. Like we watch that constantly. But there's a song in it at the end that the whole point is they're traveling and they end up at this concert at the end of the movie. And I listened to the song on like Spotify in my car, and I was like, this is good. This is a jam. I could rock out to this as a 28-year-old.
Speaking of old technology, I guess, and this isn't a Disney movie, but back when I had a CD player, I used to have the soundtrack to Shrek on
Oh,
CD.
yes. Smash Mouth, baby.
I don't know why. It was probably some like Christmas gift from my grandma or something. But yeah, it was like half Smash Mouth, and it was a good CD. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of discussed our nostalgic connection to the movies, have you ever been to any of the Disney theme parks?
Yes, I've only been to Florida, but a couple times. I think we went when I was.
Oh, you would have gone in band.
Yeah, well, the first time I went, I was younger, but not like so young that like the characters are all real to you and like peak
Hmm.
childhood going to Disney World. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I must have been in middle school maybe. And then we went. Was it freshman year of high school with band, which was probably
Yeah.
like the most miserable trip to Disney World ever because it was a band trip.
Yep.
And then the last time I went was in junior year of high school. We played like a baseball tournament down in the Disney Sports Complex, so we were in the
All right.
parks when we didn't have games. But yeah, it's been a long time since I went there. I'm sure the parks are very different, but it was cool. I remember have good fun memories there, I guess.
Yeah, they're great. We went when I was younger, probably like second or third grade, which was young enough to like kind of enjoy the characters,
Hmm.
enjoy everything, all the childhood magic that comes with it. And then we went when we were a little older, and then I got to go back when I was in college, I think, because we wanted to go to Universal's Harry Potter World and
Oh yeah.
lumped Disney in there. That trip was interesting. I recommend to anybody who plans on going to both in the same trip, go to Universal first and then go to Disney. What we did was go to Universal for a day, go to Disney for 2, and then back to Universal for 2. And I don't know what it is, but Disney has everything so tight as far as their service is concerned that going from Disney back to Universal just made Universal look bad. Like,
We did that on our band trip. We did what was it like 4 days in Disney, and then we did 2 days in Universal or something. And
yeah,
by the time we got to Universal, it was just like I thought we were all just kind of over it. But it's a cool park. I feel like there's more at Universal for adults or like older kids anyway.
I would agree
But
with that.
it's just not as like magical as Disney. Like it's just
Yeah.
it seems like it's just not as cool once you're there because it's not Disney.
Yeah, there's something about Disney World and the way they run everything, from the people selling bottles of water to, the characters and performers. There's just something different about it that if you go there first and then back to another theme park like Universal, it just doesn't work. Like, you just
Mhm.
notice all of the deficiencies at the other one compared to Disney, whereas like if you just went to Universal or went there first, you wouldn't be thinking about that kind of stuff and you enjoy your time more.
It's like Chick-fil-A where all the employees buy into the magic of the place. And then if you go
Yeah,
from Chick-fil-A to McDonald's, you notice the difference.
you do. But yeah, I'm impressed by their ability to really go leagues beyond any other theme park that I've been to in
Yeah.
terms of the experience. And I think part of it was, as we'll talk today, just the legacy of Walt Disney and the worlds he created and brought to life through animation. So I think now might be a good time to jump into the actual company as it stands today. I'd like to give our listeners and you some context, because the Walt Disney Company was very different after its founding during its first, decade or two than it is today. It's a multinational entertainment and media conglomerate headquartered in Burbank, California. So they have dozens of different divisions and ways to make money. The company now contains several studios as part of its film division, which include Walt Disney Pictures, Walt Disney Animation Studios, Pixar, Marvel Studios, which they bought in 2009, Lucasfilm, which they purchased in 2012, 20th Century Animation, and Searchlight Pictures. And the other, well-known divisions of the company include television, which they own ABC, ESPN, the Disney Channel, National Geographic, and A&E, which is like, I don't know. I don't remember all the channels that well because it's been a couple years since there were channels that I watched, but I feel like that's a lot of them.
Yeah, I remember being surprised when they owned, or when I found out that they owned ABC and ESPN.
Hmm.
I mean, just from the first time I went to Disney World, as a kid who grew up loving sports, you go to like see the signs for the Wide World of Sports complex and it's branded ESPN. You're like, oh, that's so cool. And now you have the Disney Plus bundles where they have like Hulu and ESPN and National Geographic, and it's like, oh yeah, Disney owns everything.
Everything. And it does seem like that sometimes. I mean, they do, like I said, television, broadcasting. Now they're into streaming media. I didn't know they owned Hulu. But
I didn't know that until they had the bundle. I was like, that's weird that Hulu's tied into this, but now it makes sense.
So they've got Hulu, Disney Plus, of course. I've never heard of this, but they have Star Plus.
No idea.
And also ESPN Plus, which I guess we can infer is the ESPN streaming platform. But in addition to media, they've also got, of course, their line of theme park resorts. There are actually Disneylands located in 6 different cities, one in Southern California, one outside of Orlando, Florida, and then they have them in Tokyo, Paris, Hong Kong, and Shanghai. And the company also boasts 8 other theme parks, along with hotels and, of course, the Disney Cruise Lines. And then along with that, drawing back from their presence in our culture, in our media culture, they've got consumer products, publishing, and other international operations, which make the company just absolutely massive.
Can I ask you a question that is going to get your opinion on a very specific group of people?
Sure.
And we don't like to single people out on our podcast and stereotype one specific group, but how do you feel about the people who take the same vacation to Disney World every single year?
The Disney people. I was just talking about this actually with somebody about like Disney people, because there are Disney people. And I don't know, I guess I kind of take the stance there with like everybody has their own way to escape, the stress and the struggle of everyday life. And whether it's sports or entertainment or music or, alcohol and drugs, whatever you like, as long as they're legal drugs. Everybody has their way to escape. And I feel like, if you want to be a 30, 40, 50-year-old adult and like totally buy into the Disney magic, and you can do that on a regular basis, go for it. Like, I don't want to judge that. I think a younger version of me would have been kind of snobby and been like, well, you could go to Italy for the same amount, but some people wouldn't have fun in Italy.
So that's the point I was going to make. And you are way less judgmental than I was going to be. And I'm really not. Like, I agree with that idea that if that's what you like and what you want to do with your leisure time, then go for it. Like, if you can afford to do that, take a trip to Disney World every year. But I was just laughing because I have a coworker who, found out that Rita and I were taking this trip to Germany and Switzerland. She was like, we pay you too much money. And I was like, no, we just find good travel deals. And then I found out that she's planning a trip to go to Disney World. And I'm like, your trip to Disney World is going to cost just as much, if not more, as our trip to Europe.
Absolutely. The tickets alone, the tickets to Disney World are probably the same cost as the flight to Europe, first of all. And then the ticket doesn't get you anything inside the park. You're still paying theme park prices for food and drink the whole time you're there. Yeah. Which, if you've been to Europe, you know that, like, even though the euro has the advantage right now, you're still not paying that much for good food and drink if you're finding the right places in Italy, at least. Like,
don't go to Switzerland.
Well, no, you just got back, but Switzerland is markedly different.
Greece was cheap, though.
Is it? Yeah, I mean, yeah. I assumed, like, I've heard that the Mediterranean countries like Spain, Italy, Greece, just because they have such a plethora of good food and good wine, that, I mean, you can get a great meal there that in the States would cost you $50, $60, $70 for like 20.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a digression and tangent, but the first night that Rita and I were in Athens, we got dinner and we both had what Americans would call it gyros, but obviously much more traditional Greek, called souvlaki. We both had that. We've had a Greek salad like as an appetizer, something else, and drinks, and our total bill was €14, which is about the equivalent of like 16, 17 bucks. Like, just crazy cheap if you know where to get food and do it the right way. Stay away from touristy stuff.
I mean, I guess I would get a little bit more judgmental if it was something that wasn't Disney, just because of the caliber of the experience. And I would lump Universal in with Disney, but like if you were going to Cedar Point or Busch Gardens or just a roller coaster park every year, then I would get a little bit more judgmental and be like, I don't feel like it's that different year to year. Disney comes out with such innovative things.
I feel sort of the same way about like beach vacations, which like that's fine. Like that's a totally relaxing way to spend your time off. But I would just get bored of doing the same thing and seeing the same thing. But that's just, personal preference.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the times where my family tried to just have a week-long beach vacation where we just sat and relaxed, we left the beach early to go to Washington, D.C. and do stuff. Because we were so bored just sitting around every day, all day after like 4 days at the beach, that we used the last 3 of our week to go see D.C. and see museums. And
it's a good thing there were never any joint Hall Molito family vacations, because they would have been miserable.
I think everybody just has their travel style. And I wouldn't judge anybody for doing what they want to do, but I do like the people who say, like your coworkers, oh, I can't believe you can afford to go to Europe while also going to Disney World, are just full of shit. Like they just didn't look truthfully at the budget and what things cost, because Disney World is not a cheap vacation unless you live right next to it and can drive there. And even then it's still like, you're just saving flight money.
Well, I think that's just kind of maybe a flaw in the way we think about traveling. Like traveling is so easy now. It's not like going to Europe isn't the big ordeal that it probably was 20 years ago. It's pretty easy to find flights over there at convenient times at not that expensive, if you're flexible,
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to be flexible. You got to be willing to change dates and take bad flights sometimes, like red eyes. I don't know. Yeah. I think the more flexible you are, the better chance you have of getting a good deal.
Yeah, for sure. Back to Disney?
Back to Disney. Anyway, exiting our tangent back onto the main road to the Walt Disney Company of today. The company employs 223,000 employees as of 2019. It trades on the New York Stock Exchange under the DIS symbol, and the company has been a component of the Dow Jones Industrial Average since 1991. And for those who don't understand what that means, I can't explain it well myself, but the Dow Jones Industrial Average is a way of, correct me if I explain this improperly, but a way of kind of marking the overall economy based on a collection of companies that are the largest in the United States.
I like that you think I understand the stock market better than you. When
you went to business school. I didn't go to business school.
I just had a hour-long conversation with your dad about investing because I'm dumb, and he was explaining everything to me.
Yeah, he's definitely got a handle on it better than I do. But anyway, being a part of the Dow Jones is akin to being General Motors or Ford or Amazon or Facebook or Google.
Yeah, it's a big company.
Yeah. In 2020, actually, Disney saw $65 billion in revenue. For a little bit of context, Amazon saw about $113 billion, so about twice that, but still, like, Amazon's huge.
Yeah, that's actually a lot closer than I would have thought it would be. But 2020, though, wouldn't that be like a down year for them? Because, they obviously had much less tourism. I don't know if they were shut down the whole year, but they definitely missed out on a lot of tourism and probably a lot of production and both TV and film. Like, wouldn't their revenues have been higher that year, or is that a year lagging? Like, is that a normal year for them?
It seemed to be a fairly normal year. So in 2019, they did $69 billion. So they only dropped $4 billion, which sounds like a lot when you say $4 billion, but when you consider that we're talking about
only $4 billion.
Well, they went from $69 billion to 65. So it wasn't a huge drop. And I think, I looked at the numbers a little bit to try to understand this, but in a normal year, the parks and the theme parks and cruise lines, that revenue only accounts for about 1/4 of the entire Disney revenue. And I would venture to guess, this is based on pure speculation because I didn't find any statistics or numbers to back this up, but I would guess that the extra time humanity spent streaming things and online consuming entertainment and media probably made up for some of that.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, they had a drop, but Disney Plus was already a thing, so I'm sure they saw some extra numbers in that arena enough that it didn't really affect them too much. I guess it's a testament to how big of a company they are. You know, if they were just a theme park company, they would have been shit out of luck, but that's a fourth of their income.
Yeah.
All that to say, the Walt Disney Company is one of the biggest media companies in the world. Like I said, they stand shoulder to shoulder with AT&T, Comcast, Alphabet Incorporated, which is Google, and Facebook. In 2019, in fact, they were ranked third after AT&T and Comcast. So they actually beat out Google and Facebook for revenue.
Wow.
Which is wild. And even outside of the business aspect of it, Walt Disney's contributions to animation, film, art, and the entire entertainment world are pretty impossible to dismiss, whether or not you enjoy his work or have specific opinions about the company itself. You know, he made a huge impact on the world as we know it. But the scale of his legacy might not have been possible without the humble, quite unassuming support of his brother Roy, who is our topic for today, in case you didn't know, since we've talked for half an hour about other nonsense.
In case you forgot.
But before we get to Roy and his accomplishments in his life, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Matt, you like coffee, right?
I love coffee.
Would you ever want to buy me a coffee?
Anytime, Phil. Just say the word.
You know, our dedicated listeners could also buy me a coffee.
Could they buy me a coffee as well?
They could buy you a coffee.
This sounds fantastic.
We set up this service called Buy Me a Coffee at buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside.
And people can buy us a coffee?
Yeah, it's really just a way for people to support the show if they enjoy the show. And if they're listening to the show, we sure hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, otherwise you're just, wasting your time.
At buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside, there's 3 ways that our listeners can interact with the show. Number 1, you can just donate to the show by clicking Buy Them a Coffee.
2, you can join as a member for $10 a month or $100 a year. Being a member gains you some pretty cool perks. You get access to our monthly bonus episode, History's B-Side Battles, access to our future episode queue, a name shout out on a future episode. We'll also send you a handwritten thank you postcard and sticker set, and more perks will be announced as we continue on.
There's also some different extras that people can get on our Buy Me a Coffee website. Things like choosing the topic for a future episode. If there's a lesser known person in history that you have an interest in, let us know and we'll do an episode all about them. You can also buy sets of custom postcards, sticker sets, and future merchandise that we add on there as well. Or you can draft your own advertisement script and we will promote whatever you want in a segment like this.
The website again is buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside.
Matt,
Yeah.
you owe me a coffee.
Oh. Do I get a coffee too?
You're buying.
All right.
All right, welcome back. So we left off a quite lengthy conversation about Disney and other friends, other topics.
Thanks for bearing with us.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like people want to hear things about our personal life. I hope they do. We're interesting people, I think.
Sure, yeah, totally.
So now to get into the meat of our episode, Roy Disney's life. He was born in Chicago, Illinois on June 24th, 1893. Roy was the third of 5 children. His older brothers Herbert and Raymond, younger brother Walt, and younger sister Ruth.
I didn't realize the Disney family was that big.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about the other siblings? Like, did they amount to anything?
I do know a little bit about them, and interestingly enough, there's a local connection for two of them for me here in Portland. So his oldest brother, Herbert, was the one I found the least amount of information about. He didn't ever work with his siblings. He, of course, supported them as he could, but he at some point moved from the city they lived in Missouri to Portland, Oregon, and lived there for a time before joining the rest of his family in Southern California, where Roy and Walt's company had started to gain success. It's noted, the only thing I found professionally that he did is that he worked in Los Angeles as a postal worker for a number of years.
Okay.
Raymond, his other older brother, owned a very successful insurance business located in Los Angeles, and he provided insurance for his brother's new studio and advised them throughout the early days of the company, and continued to provide insurance to the company in the ways they needed.
Interesting.
And that was all I could really find out about Raymond. And then his younger sister, Ruth, also spent time in Portland, Oregon. She was a musician known for doing a lot of philanthropic work around educating young musicians and getting young people inspired to play music. The children were born in Chicago, Illinois. Later, the family relocated to Marceline, Missouri in 1911. And their father, Elias, purchased a newspaper delivery route from the Kansas City Star. This route covered about 28 city blocks in Kansas City, Missouri, and Roy and his younger brother Walt worked as newspaper delivery boys for their father, delivering the Kansas City Times to about 700 customers and the Kansas City Star to over 600. So it was a sizable route and kind of their first foray into working life. 1 year after his father purchased the route, Roy graduated from the Manual Training High School of Kansas City and left the paper delivery route to work on a farm for the summer before joining his brother Raymond as a bank clerk at the First National Bank of Kansas City. During World War I, Roy enlisted and served in the United States Navy. However, after contracting tuberculosis in 1919, he was discharged from military duty. And after spending some time recovering from the tuberculosis, he returned to his position at the bank. While working at the bank, a coworker told Roy about an apprenticeship at Pesman Rubin, a commercial art studio. He then passed news of the open position to Walt, and it was at this studio that Walt Disney got his first job as an artist.
Do you know what they were doing at the studio? Like, I guess I don't really know what a commercial art studio does. Is that film production or?
No, from what I could find, it largely appears that they did contract work for different companies, but Walt's specific job was drawing cartoons for advertisements, specifically in theater programs and magazines and catalogs.
So it'd be kind of like early century graphic design.
Pretty much. I mean, yeah, it sounds exactly like that. Sounds like a graphic design company. Yeah. However, that company ended up laying Walt and his coworkers off in early 1920. In 1921, Walt founded an animation film studio called Laugh-O-Gram. Laugh-O-Gram. Now, side note, it's here that I felt it most appropriate to include that one of Roy's noted talents was creating respectable proper names for business entities. And I feel like Laugh-O-Gram was a sign of Walt's failing. I don't know what culture was like in the 1920s, but...
You don't like Laugh-O-Gram?
I mean, I guess it's fine. It's just, I don't know. It's awkward. I have a very, of course, I didn't live that time, and I've had a very different upbringing. So if I found out there was a film coming out that wasn't stand-up comedy or like Will Ferrell, Seth Rogen style comedy from a company called Laugh-O-Gram, I probably wouldn't watch it. Like, that's what I expect.
The gram suffix or whatever you want to call that implies that it's some kind of visual media, and then it's comedy, so it makes sense. Wasn't there like a phenomenon from like the I don't know the years 70s 80s maybe that was like smellogram, and it was supposed to be this futuristic technology that you could smell what was on your TV? It'd be like for movie theaters to sell popcorn or commercials to sell food stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously never really turned into fruition, but I feel like that's like a common phrase is something O'Gram.
Oh, I mean, it is totally, and maybe that's why I don't like it, because we've heard it enough, and it's used
It
enough
sounds
that
like Acme, whatever company. Like, it just sounds
Right.
generic.
Yeah, I feel like it's just a cliche at this point, and maybe back then it wasn't. Nonetheless,
Well, if you're giving Roy credit for coming up with better business names, like Disney isn't super creative considering it's just their name.
that's fair. I mean, it wasn't creative. Nonetheless, to slightly back up my point, Laugh-O-Gram would go bankrupt 2 years later in 1923. However,
I don't blame the name.
I mean, I don't blame the name fully either. They were also located in Kansas City, which now and at the time, I don't believe was a center of the
Media
arts and
empire.
culture. Yeah. Despite Laugh-O-Gram going out of business, one of the last cartoons Walt created with the company was a short film titled Alice's Wonderland, in which a young girl visits Walt's studio, sees their animations, and subsequently dreams of taking a train to, quote, Cartoonland, where she interacts with a number of animated characters. After the company went defunct, Walt sold a whole series of Alice comedies to film distributor Margaret J. Winkler for $1,500 per reel, which is about $24,000 in 2021. So not a small chunk of change.
I like the Inception-esque part of this where the character is being inspired by Walt's own company.
Mm-hmm.
But this also sounds like just a cheap ripoff of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland.
Sure, and it might have been. I mean, later on in 1951, Walt Disney and, Disney Studios would reproduce an animated version of Lewis Carroll's book, Alice in Wonderland. And let's be honest, the Disney company overall, I mean, we don't include Mickey Mouse in this, of course, but most of their movies are repeated stories just made for animation. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, he didn't invent Hercules, he didn't invent Pocahontas, he didn't invent Aladdin or Cinderella.
Most of their cartoons are like adaptations of old, I mean, we talked about this, old fairy tales, old fables. Like, a lot of that is not copyrighted to anyone necessarily. I guess I don't necessarily know, do you know, would Lewis Carroll have a patent or a copyright patent? Would Lewis Carroll have a copyright on Alice in Wonderland at the time, or would it be kind of public domain at this point?
Do you know what the cutoff for public domain is? I feel like it's 25 years.
I thought it was like 100 because Great Gatsby just came out this year. It was like finally public domain.
So Alice in Wonderland, the book by Lewis Carroll, was published in November of 1865. So this would have been, 85 years after its publication date. I assume Disney checked to make sure they had the rights to make the film. So either...
Don't make assumptions.
Well, that's fair. Either it was already public domain, they purchased it, or it was different enough in that it wasn't a book, it was an adaptation for film, that they got away with it. And they would do that with lots of other stories. But I don't know. It might have been directly inspired by Lewis Carroll. I would find it odd that it wasn't, since it has such similarities. Although I feel like both of them, Roy and Walt, should have been smart enough to change Alice's name if that was the case. Like, it's not like Alice's name is a required part of the story and it would have been simple to change it.
So a quick Google search here is telling me that Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass are both public domain. It says they were published because they were published before January 1st, 1923. They're public domain worldwide because Carroll died in 1898, more than 100 years ago. So I don't know if they're public domain because he died more than 100 years ago, which makes me think it wouldn't be public domain until like 23 years ago.
Yeah.
Or they're public domain because they were published before January 1st, 1923, in which case Disney probably would have been okay using the story.
Right.
Because this is a little different. Like, this isn't a fairy tale. This is an actual book.
Right. Well, if you are a trademark or copyright lawyer and want to call us or email us and give us an idea of what's going on here, please feel free to do so.
And when you inevitably sue the Disney production company, please cite our podcast in
For
your
their
lawsuit and give us some
1951
kind
film.
of give us some kind of what's it called? Payout benefit here.
Are they going to send them a cease and desist for their 60-year-old film, 70-year-old film.
No, you sue for all the money they made off of it and donate a chunk of that change to history's B-side.
I feel like Lewis Carroll has an estate somewhere that would have a problem with that. It's like great.
You know what? We're defending Lewis Carroll here. Maybe his estate should be one of our main sponsors here.
Yeah. If you are part of the Lewis Carroll estate, please reach out to us at historiesbside.com. Back to the main highway. So he's got this sale of Alice comedies, which gives them a little bit of cash. And so in 1923, Roy ends up abandoning his banking career to join Walt in Hollywood, where the two begin planning the start of the Disney Brothers Studios. Roy began working as the cameraman, bookkeeper, and even cell washer for a time. And for those who don't know, cells are the transparent sheets on which traditional animated cartoons were drawn.
Were they just like dry erase? Like what were you washing?
I mean, if they were dry erase, I don't know that they would need washed, but I guess as far as I understand, they were similar to the way, teachers with an overhead projector would have clear sheets on which they would draw. I don't think dry erase. Well, right. Much. I mean, I don't think Walt Disney was using dry erase markers at the time. I assume they were probably some form of charcoal that you could wash off the surface.
Right.
But yes, essentially dry erase overhead projector sheets for those that are, early 90s children.
Our age or older that actually used overhead projectors in school. Yeah, right.
We were right at the end of it. They stopped using them in 8th grade. So together, Roy and Walt founded the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio on October 16th, 1923. Walt leading the creative side while Roy ran the actual business. Roy's modesty and dedication to his brother's dream was a central characteristic of his work at the studio. In 1926, when the company was renamed the Walt Disney Studio, Roy elected to bow out of his role as a co-founder. And in fact, it was Roy himself who proposed this name change.
Do you think he preferred to be out of the spotlight? Like, is this a personality trait, or he just thought that Walt was the visionary and should get the credit?
I think this was a personality trait. I mean, if I'm being honest, this episode contains so little about Roy because of his demeanor, because of his modesty. And, he really was just somebody who went to work and did his job and didn't care for the fame. In fact, it was stated that he avoided the fame and the spotlight for his family's sake. He didn't want to be well known. And when he was, because of his brother's success, he wasn't fully comfortable with it. He was a good businessman, but I don't think he ever had a desire to be well known or have the fame that his brother achieved. And that, I think, to, I guess, spoil the end of the episode, like, that was his, I think, biggest accomplishment, was a very almost un-American distaste for glory and attention and fame. He just wanted to do his job and support his brother. And I think he saw his brother's talent. And that is Roy's legacy, was supporting his brother's vision and his brother's dream in a way that didn't take away from it, and also he never tried to upstage his brother, and I don't know that he was ever even jealous or resentful, which we'll get to in a moment.
Yeah. Seems very unusual for what we're used to.
Right. By 1929, Roy was executive vice president of Walt Disney Productions and had assumed the duties of the company's CEO, though he wouldn't receive the actual title of CEO officially until 1968. He succeeded Walt as president in 1945 to relieve him of his administrative responsibilities, allowing Walt to focus more time and energy on creating. Roy himself was an astute businessman and careful with money, and he willingly grew the business from Walt's shadow into the wildly successful company we know today. Despite being a financially cautious man, he was at some points willing to spend when it mattered. On one occasion, he paid ABC 15 times their initial $500,000 investment in Disneyland, simply to buy out its interest in the company, which gave Walt Disney Productions complete control of the park and also bought its freedom to take elsewhere the Mickey Mouse Club and Zorro television series, which ABC had previously canceled.
It's kind of ironic that Disney now owns ABC.
Isn't it? Yeah,
I mean, they both made out on the deal. Like, Disney funded Disneyland and then got paid 15 times their investment, and then eventually Disney just bought all of ABC.
right.
They outgrew their investor.
Well, and that number was around $7.5 million. And at the time, he was known as such a careful financial person that even Walt was like, I'm not sure that this is a good expenditure, and I'm surprised Roy's doing it. But Roy was only ruthless in one way, and that was in defense of his brother's vision and his brother's dream. He really did kind of epitomize the idea of laying down and sacrificing oneself for another person. In this case, his younger brother. So it makes a bit more sense than if it was just a random business partner. But
yeah,
he really did have no problem not only seeing the magic behind Walt's creativity, but also standing up for it time and time again. Roy would continue in the role of president until 1968, when, following Walt's death 2 years earlier in 1966, Roy postponed his retirement to supervise the construction of what was then known as Disney World Vacation Resort and Theme Park. He would later rename it Walt Disney World as a tribute to his late brother, and ensured the park would live up to his brother's name and expectations. And I mean, he did do that. It surprised me, I guess, because I always saw Disney World as like Walt's vision. And I think Walt certainly had a part in it, of course, but a lot of the decisions that were made by Roy. And I don't think we can take the entity that is known as Disneyland or Disney World for granted without considering Roy's role in supervising its building and its construction.
Yeah, for sure.
Overall, as a businessman, Roy was known as the gentle visionary. It's noted that he was more than a financial genius in the same way that Walt was more than a film producer. He could read people's personalities and had a knack for using clear, modest language. In learning about his role alongside his famous brother, one almost starts to feel a sense of resentment on behalf of Roy, given some of the perceived slights and superior fame of his brother. But frankly, he would probably disagree with that sentiment, spending his life upholding his brother's name and ensuring Walt's dreams would be made possible. In his own words about his brother Walt Disney, "It is a name that is good, more than good, anywhere in the world."
So, obviously, it's his brother. Is very supportive of him and feels that way about him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious your thoughts on the idea of how much goodness the name Disney carries. Because I don't know how much you've read about this, but I know in more recent years there's been like some speculation that Walt Disney had some potential racist ideologies or involvement with some anti-Semitism. And I did a little bit of reading about this last night because I knew we were going to eventually talk about this topic. But I'm curious if you think that the Disney name is good worldwide.
I guess that depends on your viewpoint, and it depends on how well you can accept the work of somebody outside of their character. I'll let you speak a bit about, some of his more pointed criticisms, because I frankly didn't read that much about Walt Disney himself outside of trying to contextualize Roy's contributions. So I would love to hear if you have any specific examples. But I guess I want to draw a comparison. So back when the Michael Jackson movie and documentary came out, and the woke world was fighting back against Michael Jackson for a moment, I heard a really good take on a podcast where one of the hosts asked the other host, do you feel comfortable listening to his music? And the guy responded, I do, and here's why. And his reasoning was that we don't necessarily need to completely eschew somebody's entire cultural achievement just because their moral life was either bankrupt or faulty or improper. And his point largely didn't have anything to do with morals. It had more to do with the fact that if we were to actually carry to its logical conclusion the idea that we shouldn't listen to Michael Jackson's music because of his questionable actions, then you also can't listen to The Weeknd, you can't listen to Justin Timberlake, and you can't listen to most pop music today. He was such an icon culturally, musically, artistically, that to try to remove his contributions because of something he did would be almost impossible unless you just stopped listening to pop music at all. And I don't know that it's necessarily helpful to never listen to Michael Jackson, and it doesn't help any of the victims. I guess it makes his family more money, which maybe is a downside, but I kind of use that same thought process here, where Walt Disney was such an artistic visionary that to try to escape any sort of his influence would almost require you to stop watching cartoons. Right? I mean,
yeah, and I think with that perspective, probably this conversation is almost useless because basically the stuff that I read made it seem that he never really did anything wrong. It was more just like questionable partnerships and decision making. I don't know. It was more that like supposedly he invited a member of the Nazi propagandist department, whatever that group was, to basically come tour his office and his studios like less than 2 weeks after Crystal Knot happened. So like clearly the Nazis were involved in some bad things, and he still invited this Nazi propagandist to basically kind of legitimize their relationship by inviting this person into it. And then there was some other stuff about the way some maybe African-American stereotypes were portrayed in some of the earlier cartoons, some different, I guess, maybe attitudes in the way that some decisions were made in the way the company was originally started. But it is worth noting that every person who worked with Disney at this time, and we're talking about Walt, not Roy, probably going along with the fact that there's just not as much known about Roy and he wasn't as public.
Right.
Every person that worked with him in this capacity all said he never said or did anything that was anti-Semitic or racist. Maybe he, connected and got involved with some of the wrong people, but it wasn't like a Henry Ford scenario where he actually did like distribute anti-Semitic information and publications and things like that. Like
right.
He just maybe necessarily hooked up with the wrong people or connected with the wrong people. Even some of his, higher profile employees and coworkers who didn't necessarily always get along with Walt or liked Walt very much still came to his defense when it came to things like him potentially having these not so great ideologies, and said that he didn't have them at all. And I think this might just be a case of, in our woke modern society, we look back on things and get offended by things that at the time weren't necessarily as wrong. And even today, like in our progressive society, we know that they're wrong, but they're also really not. Like, we're taking offense to things for the purpose of taking offense to them. Like, we can't justify racist caricatures that took place in the 1950s in the way that we can say, people's attitudes towards slavery in the 1700s was completely different than the way we think about black people now, because that's true. We use that "it was the time" caveat a lot, but like people should have known by the 1950s that like making caricatures of specific groups of people were not good, not great. Right. But I don't know, it is still a different, like you wouldn't have those types of cartoons today. And I think I'm just rambling at this point, but I don't know, like I don't really know where I fall on it, because the people who knew him agreed that he wasn't this bad person. And I don't know if it's just our ideas now are shaping the way we think about people in the past.
Well, I think, and this is going to dive down a giant rabbit hole philosophically that has nothing to do with this episode other than this specific point, but I think every person has an overall spectrum of behavior. Like, you've done things I'm sure that you're not proud of. I've done things I'm not proud of. Like, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does things that probably aren't perfect morally. And I guess when it comes to the idea of, people call it cancel culture or whatever you want to call it, like I believe that our economic vote in the form of buying something is a thing. I believe that we vote economically, but I think to try to completely live your life in the United States of 2021 while avoiding any entity that did anything wrong or immoral is unless you're going to go live on a farm in Montana and make everything yourself, you're done. You can't live in modern society without participating in an overall system that contains players that didn't do the best thing. And I don't think it's on, I think a lot of times, especially now, we put it on like the consumer or the voter to make like, we have to stop listening to Michael Jackson or, not watch Disney cartoons because they did bad things. And I like, maybe that's so, but I also think like to actually carry that out in an extreme way is virtually impossible. And I don't think it's the onus of the consumer to correct the behavior of the supplier. Like maybe a little bit, but I think largely that's a job for governments and laws.
Yeah. And to your point, like if you did want to boycott Disney, like good luck. I mean, that's not the good way to think about corporations because but they're everywhere. Like that's the whole thing is like, did I consume any Disney today? No, but I did watch Hulu while I was eating dinner. Mm-hmm. And since we've been on this call, I've gotten an ESPN notification on my phone. So Did I directly consume Disney? No, but the Disney Corporation is benefiting off of me just by going through my normal daily life. You know what I mean?
I guess, to kind of escape the purely logical, philosophical part of this, I think general common sense, as rare as it might be, is probably the best way to go about it. Like, let's recognize that Walt Disney had faults. He's not a perfect hero. None of them are. Let's recognize his faults. Let's be honest about how he could have done better so that we can do better ourselves. But I don't think that needs to include never looking at a Disney cartoon or never enjoying the good things he did in his life. I think that's a very black and white way to see the world. It's impractical to me. It's almost like being vegan with everything. Like, great. Like now you're eating vegan and now you can't listen to any musician who did anything bad ever, which like, good luck. I
can't watch sports because half the athletes have been arrested for one thing or another.
I get a little frustrated with the constant groupthink as far as I don't like calling it cancel culture because I understand the validity behind some of it. Like, I don't think there should be, like we talked about recently, I don't think there should be Dr. Seuss books with active racist caricatures being sold. Do I think that means we need to never read another Dr. Seuss book ever again because he had racist ideologies?
I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to kind of lead me to my whole point of this side conversation was that on our September bonus episode, which just came out pretty recently, we actually talked about Dr. Seuss. So for people listening that don't know what you're talking about with Dr. Seuss, join as a member on buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside. And then you can get access to our bonus episodes. But yeah, we talked about, some of Dr. Seuss's sort of questionable books and ideas maybe.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about how Disney had faults and flaws. Like, is there a name that is good anywhere in the world? Is there anyone that you can think of that inspires good just by hearing their name?
Gandhi? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know enough about Gandhi to know if he did anything off color.
I got one name for you, and then we can move on and get back to this episode. Fred Rogers.
Okay. I mean, we don't know yet. There could be somebody that comes out of the woodwork.
Yeah, who knows?
Anyway, back to Walt Disney, and actually, truthfully, back to Roy Disney. I feel like this is almost a bizarre end cap on our entire conversation, but after, delaying his early retirement for the sake of Disney World, Roy finally got to retire after its opening in 1971. Unfortunately, 2 months later, he ended up dying of a stroke at the age of 78 on December 20th, 1971.
Oh, wow.
So it almost, like, from a perspective now, looking on his life, it almost appears that he, like, gave his last efforts to making Disney World what it is for
Yeah.
Walt's sake, and then just succumbed to a stroke, which is like, it's sad, but it also like, as much as that is unfortunate, like everything I read about Roy, it almost fits. Like, he decided at an early age that he wanted to dedicate his life to supporting his brother, and I don't know that he ever stopped.
Yeah.
You know, it's a question we're going to return to in just a moment, because I want to just get out some of his legacy comments before we return to this conversation, because I feel like if we wait, it's just going to be random at the end of the episode. But one of the Walt Disney World railroad locomotives, which actually turned 100 years old in 2016, is named after Roy Disney. Roy was a benefactor of the California Institute of the Arts, and the Herb Alpert School of Music's primary performance space is named the Roy O. Disney Concert Hall. One of his more well-known monuments is a statue of Roy seated on a park bench beside Minnie Mouse, located in the Town Square section of Main Street, USA, at the Magic Kingdom theme park in Florida. And a duplicate is located outside the Teen Disney building at Disney's corporate headquarters.
Do you know why he's pictured with Minnie? Like, is there some kind of connection between Roy and that specific character?
I looked this up, and there wasn't any mention of a reason why it was Minnie. I venture to guess that because there are statues of Walt and Mickey, it made sense that his right-hand man, Roy, would be pictured with Mickey's partner, Minnie. But there wasn't any specific connection between the two. The one thing I will note that I did find is that in both statues, Roy's hand is pictured underneath Minnie's. They're holding hands, and Minnie's kind of looking at him, you know, like she's looking at a role model or an older brother or an uncle or something that she adores. And a lot of people have speculated, including a Disney Imagineer, that the fact that Roy's hand is underneath Minnie's is a testament and a symbol of Roy lifting up and supporting Walt so thoroughly during his time as a businessman with Disney.
It's typical. Walt gets the credit, Roy gets the girl.
Exactly? I don't know how to respond to that. In 2014, Roy Disney was portrayed in the feature film Walt Before Mickey, written and directed by actor and producer John Heder, who was the actor who played Napoleon Dynamite.
Interesting.
Yeah, as soon as I saw his picture, I was like, he looks familiar. And then I had trouble imagining, like, Napoleon Dynamite's actor being serious enough to, like, direct another film.
Yeah, I don't think I can see him doing anything other than Napoleon Dynamite. Well, I guess he was in the Benchwarmers too, wasn't he? Like the same guy? But that's the same kind of goofy, awkward character.
Yeah. So I know we've kind of taken a lot of tangents, and I don't want to make this episode too long, but given that
You thought this was going to be a short one.
I did, I guess I'd like to take a moment to consider and discuss the question, is there merit in being the, quote, man behind the curtain, in taking a more humble road and sacrificing your own glory to realize a larger goal? You know, I feel like we've dealt with this dynamic when we talked about Max Martin and the fact that he's involved in so many different pop hits but never really claimed the fame. This also reminded me a little bit of Lizzie Maggi, although I don't know that she had the same commitment to modesty. You know, we didn't really discuss, or it wasn't even really possible to discuss her opinion about, you know, the other version, more popular version of Monopoly. But I mean, do you think it's a value or a merit to somebody that they're willing to kind of step back and just do their job without collecting glory or fame?
I mean, I think there's merit in it. I think it depends on your personality. Like,
Yeah.
probably the reason Roy and Walt were so successful, and other than the fact that they were just brothers and probably had good chemistry and knew each other very well in that way, it probably helped that Walt was a very personable, outgoing, in the spotlight person, and Roy was okay with being in the background, probably wanted to be in the background. Like, that definitely helped this type of business where you need that front man. It's the entertainment industry, but then that front man also can't handle all of the back end business putting things together, funding everything. Like, you need someone who can handle the day-to-day stuff for you.
Right.
So I don't know. I think there is merit in both. I remember in the Max Martin episode, you said something that he had it figured out because, you know, other people had to deal with the fame and success, and he just got to do what he loved, producing music and making money off of it. And I don't know if Roy necessarily loved being the business guy. I mean, maybe, probably, if he did it for so long, but I'm sure he had other interests, but it just seemed like he put whatever he wanted to aside to help Walt fulfill his dreams and ideas.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree that it's kind of up to the person. Like, if you're the type of person that wants the fame and the glory, it's probably not as much of a benefit to you to take the back seat and just make sure things work. But everybody values different things differently.
The minute our podcast hits it off and we become celebrities, I'm cutting you out so that you don't take too much fame away from me.
Why do you think I would want to take the fame?
I don't know. You used to perform on stage.
I mean, you're absolutely correct in that if this, like, if for whatever reason History's B-side went viral and we were absolute celebrities, I would eat up the attention. that would definitely happen.
All right, well, let's test some Disney knowledge. Got a nice quiz coming up for you.
Let's get it. I feel good about it.
All right, we'll be right back. When we decided to make a podcast, the first thing we did was download Anchor.
Because we have no money, and Anchor is free.
You can also record and edit your podcast right from your phone or a computer.
Then, it only takes one click to share your podcast to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more.
And because we have no money, Anchor helps pair us with advertisers and lets our listeners support the History's B-Side podcast directly on our page.
If you've got an idea for your own podcast, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Once upon a time, in a galaxy far, far away, better known as Portland, Matt Melito was hosting an episode of History's B-Side about Disney.
I like your combination of Disney and Lucasfilm lines. That's good.
Which is owned by Disney now.
I know.
That's one of your questions. Just
Oh,
kidding. So we end every episode with a short 3-question quiz just to test today's host, see how much he studied around his topic, and maybe the listener listening at home knows some of these. Considering it's a Disney-themed episode, you might actually know some of these if you're a listener, and maybe you're smarter than Matt, so we'll see. What was that face?
It's me being excited about people being smarter than me.
That they're smarter than us?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, first question.
So,
let's prove them
I
wrong.
have 3 questions for you that are relative to Disney, of course. They're not specifically about Roy, although 2 of them are pretty connected to him, I guess. And then the last one is going to be probably your most difficult question, which is going to be more specifically about Disney entertainment. So,
All right.
Question number 1. What was the total cost to build Walt Disney World and have it ready to go for opening day on October 1st, 1971?
I'm supposed to blind guess this.
It was I read an article that was about Roy, so
Oh, okay.
it's probably not the exact number. This is like a round figure. There's like an
40
anecdote that goes with it, so I thought you might have read it.
I'm going to go with $49 million.
You're going to want to go a little higher than that, bud.
$149 million.
So the anecdote was that Walt was doing an interview that was about just the sheer cost of building Walt Disney World, or wouldn't have been called Walt Disney World at the time, but he joked that he expected the project to cost $100 million, which was a staggering amount of money to build a project like this. The actual cost ended up being $400 million, which was the largest private construction project in the world. And this is super impressive. When it was finished, it was fully funded by Roy's oversight and investments that he collected. They had $0 in debt at opening.
That's wild. There's an interesting anecdote regarding Roy's modesty and kindness where, they were buying up property in Florida for Disney World. And there was a woman who refused to sell her house. She didn't want to sell her home and her property to the Disney Corporation. But the property itself was valued at about $5,000. And she, didn't want to sell for that. And he was kind and was like, it's her home. She's an older woman. Like, I understand. Give her 12. So he more than doubled the offer for the actual price, the market price of her property, just simply because he felt she deserved to get more money.
That's cool.
Yeah.
She should have said no.
He would have doubled it
She
again.
could have lived in Disney World.
30,000, right next to the, I don't know, Epcot Center.
She could have lived in Cinderella's castle.
Yeah.
All right. Your second question. This one is going to be a little bit confusing in the way I ask it, so I'm going to try to be clear about this, I guess. But you've been to Walt Disney World, so you're familiar with the fact that there are 4 different theme parks within Walt Disney World. There's Magic Kingdom, Epcot, what's now called Hollywood Studios, and Animal Kingdom. So obviously Walt passed away before the construction of Walt Disney World was complete, but he had pretty specific ideas of how he wanted the park built. And Roy made the executive decision that everything would be done exactly to Walt's ideas. Whatever Walt wanted was how they were going to finish the project. With the exception of one of these theme parks, Roy took it in a different direction than what Walt had originally planned. Which of these theme parks did Roy kind of steer the direction for the future theme park in a different way?
I'm going to guess Epcot, just because it's different. It's, Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios, I feel like, are pretty straightforward and up Walt's alley. Animal Kingdom might be a close second as far as my answer, but I feel like Epcot is the one that stands out to me in terms of being a little bit more outwardly focused. It's more internationally focused. But I feel like Epcot has the most uniqueness about it of the 4, so I guess that's going to be my guess.
Epcot is correct.
Yes!
Epcot stands for the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. And actually, I found this question just out of sheer curiosity, trying to figure out what Epcot stood for or why it got that name. But it was actually originally planned by Walt to be a real city that would, quote, never cease to be a living blueprint of the future. So it was supposed to actually have an urban center, residential and industrial areas, schools, and a transit system. It was supposed to be a futuristic city drawing on the latest technology and innovation from American industry.
Interesting.
When Walt died, Roy and WED Enterprises, which is like the R&D side of Disney, today they're called Imagineering, so that's like that modern engineering side of Disney, basically. But this group, along with Roy, found that the planned city concept would be unfeasible. They instead designed it as a second theme park dedicated to human achievement, technological innovation, and international culture to sort of resemble like a permanent World's Fair.
I mean, I feel like that's what it is, kind of.
Yeah, for sure.
It is a permanent World's Fair.
And I'm pretty sure, like, Hollywood Studios, which when I was there, it was, MGM Studios or something. Yeah. That one and Animal Kingdom are both fairly new. Not, like, super new, but a lot newer than Epcot and Magic Kingdom. Because I believe the original park was just Magic Kingdom. Like, Epcot wasn't even finished and opened until years after even Roy passed away.
Right.
But they had the design for this futuristic city that was supposed to be alongside of what we now know as Magic Kingdom. All right. And your third and final question, which I think is probably the most difficult of the 3. So I'm going to just let you guess as many answers as you want here.
I don't want to interrupt. Did I answer 2 questions already?
Yeah.
What 2?
The cost of...
the cost. The cost and Epcot. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
My bad. I kind of lumped those in together in my brain.
And your third and final question, which is probably the most difficult of the three, although there's a bunch of answers, so you can keep guessing and you'll probably get some of them at least. But Disney, obviously been around a long time, produced tons and tons of films, and they're famous for their animation.
Yeah.
Can you name the top 10 highest grossing animated movies of all time, adjusted for inflation?
Oh my God.
I will give a caveat here. 9 of the 10 are Disney movies. So if you end up with the top 10 Disney movies, or even the one movie that's not a Disney movie that's in the top 10, I'll give you a ton of credit. And the inflation number is based on July 2020, so about a year ago. You don't need to name all 10. I would just want to see how many of them you can get.
I feel like Alice in Wonderland was probably there. It was pretty early. I'm gonna go with that one as far as like the oldest that I can think of.
Alice in Wonderland is not on the list, but
Dang.
you're right in thinking a very old movie is number 1.
I don't remember the other older Disney movies. I think Toy Story has to be on there.
Actually, no.
Wow. Well, here goes. Are any of the Toy Stories on there?
No, but there are a couple sequels that are actually on this list. I'm surprised by that. But I guess if they get the hype and the marketing up, that people do come for the sequels.
I mean, at this point, I feel like I'm just naming Disney movies, but I feel like Cinderella, maybe, Snow White, and the Seven Dwarfs.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is number 1. That movie came out in 1937 originally, and that's actually, I think it was their first production. If it wasn't their first production, it was one of the very early ones. And the adjusted for inflation amount is over $1 billion, $1,021,330,000, which obviously that wasn't what they brought in at the time. But in 1937 dollars, this film basically funded the entire Disney production company to be able to produce a lot more films in the future.
Wow. Man, I don't know. I feel like Pocahontas had to have been big.
Not on the list.
Aladdin? Beauty and the Beast? Like I said, I'm just naming Disney movies. This is terrible.
I'll go through a couple that are on the list. So I said Snow White was number 1. Number 2 is 101 Dalmatians.
Oh.
The Lion King, Fantasia, The Jungle Book, Sleeping Beauty. Number 7 is the only non-Disney movie on the list, and this will blow your mind. Shrek 2.
No, Shrek 2? It's not even the best Shrek.
I think it I think it has to do with the fact that the sequel took so long to come out, because the other sequel that's on this list was another one that the original movie was very popular, and they didn't come out with a sequel for years and years later. So the hype for it really drove the sequel to get on the list. But number 8 is Pinocchio. Number 9, this is the other sequel, The Incredibles 2.
Oh my God. Definitely
And then,
also not as good as The Incredibles.
Then number 10 is Bambi, and just rounding out number 11, because it'll be the 10th highest grossing Disney animation, is number 11, Finding Nemo.
Oh. See, that's the thing. They made so many movies that I don't even know if I could, like, if you just asked me to name Disney movies ad nauseum until I couldn't, I would have missed things that you just said.
And what's crazy, and obviously this is an adjusted for inflation list, but the only 2 on that list that are from this century are The Incredibles 2, 2018, and Finding Nemo, 2003. Like, the rest are all older movies. And I don't know if that's just because we've shifted in the way that we consume media. Like, people don't necessarily go to the theater as much for new releases, but it's just kind of crazy how big Disney was to build their brand to be such an influence on culture today.
Yeah. That's the thing. I didn't even think about Pinocchio or Bambi or 101 Dalmatians. Like, those, I don't know that I would have even thought of those to name them if you just said name Disney movies.
I think this might be, and we've talked about how we don't really watch movies. I think I've seen every single one on this list, though.
I've seen all of them.
Again, another testament to Disney's influence.
Yeah. Even people who don't watch movies watch Disney movies.
Yeah, this is like the only movie list ever that I've seen all the movies on it.
Yeah. Those are good. Those are good questions.
Thank you.
Well, as always, we really appreciate our listeners and your interest and attention to our podcast, especially on episodes where we take, I think at this point, at least a dozen tangents about our own personal ideas and opinions. But we hope you enjoy those.
And if you enjoy listening to our ramblings, again, join as a member on buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside. You can hear us ramble at least once a month on our bonus episodes.
About more ridiculous things, believe it or not. As always, please feel free to reach out to us and leave comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, and other blurbs at historiesbside@gmail.com or reach out to us on social media. We really appreciate your support, and we will see you next week.
History's B-Side is an independent, listener-supported podcast.
Leave us a review or subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting service. And follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram @History's B-Side.
Send us your feedback or inquire about sponsorship and advertising opportunities by emailing us at historiesbside@gmail.com.
You can donate to the show at buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside. While you're there, check out our membership perks, merchandise, and more.
This episode was researched and produced by your hosts, Matt Melito
and Phil Hall. Thanks for listening to History's B-Side.